Good morning, everybody. How are we? Fantastic. That sounded pretty mute, actually. Good morning, everybody. How are we? Right, brilliant. This conversation is about you. It's about the leader you want to be. It's about leadership, which is, I think, the biggest differentiator in what we're going to do in facing into the changes in the world in the next 10, 15 years. And so we want to talk about you. We want to talk about the kind of leader you want to be. And that is the topic of conversation. We've got some tips from our experience on what we think great leaders in supply chain can do to transform the world. Because actually, the world is being transformed by supply chain leaders. And you are all part of that. So the question really that I pose to you, first and foremost, is what kind of leader do you want to be? Do you want to be self-assured?
Or would you like to be a curious leader?
Would you like to be an enterprise leader?
Or a supply chain functional expert?
Would you like to be performance-focused?
Or driving transformation?
Would you like to be empowering?
Or relentlessly accountable? I think the important thing that we have realized, thanks Bart, is that in today's environment, supply chain leaders, you've got to be both, all of those things. Organizations are needing a new type of leader, one that can drive short-term performance and long-term transformation and unite individuals across an ecosystem with empathy and catalyze reinvention. We call these people the enterprise leader. And can you guess what percentage of individuals are enterprise leaders? I'm going to pick on you. Out of 100. 30? Not quite. 14%. Just 14. But the great news is they can be developed, and that's what we're going to help you do today. So, my name's Leo. I'm an associate client partner at Korn, Ferry, as Leon said. My role is to assess and develop supply chain leaders. I typically do a lot of CSCO succession. I've probably met your CSCO, and I'm hopefully going to pick probably the next one. Bart?
I'm Bart. I've got 35 years in supply chain, Unilever, Reckitt, GSK, Haleon. I was the chief supply chain officer at Haleon. Now I spend my time working with private equity. I do a lot of investment work with private equity. I do a lot of investment work myself. And I work with the London Business School, Korn Ferry, and York University on educating and helping accelerate the development of supply chain leaders. Thank you.
So I think the first thing I would be wondering if I was sat in your shoes is, why should I care about our perspective? So in the last 6 years, we've conducted more than 41,000 supply chain assessments, both across hard skill and soft skill, across the value chain, and over 2,000 at the chief supply chain officer level. Why am I showing this to you? Because it gives us a wonderful understanding of what good looks like in each of these areas, what's dictating success as you progress, and what the best are doing differently. Alongside this, we've worked with 13 of Gartner's top 25 in the last 18 months, helping them to define what's the future North Star for our supply chain talent, and how do we get people there. So that's the credibility part of the presentation building over. The bit of data to get you into now. So we regularly bring together our chief supply chain officer population, and we ask them, what do you expect from your leadership? And things that are traditionally, do I have a laser? I do have a laser pointer, great. Traditionally prized skill sets, cost optimization, process improvement, they're at the bottom of the lists. That's not because they aren't important, they are, but they're table stakes now. Where we see, right at the top, is agile mindset. So what is agile mindset? It is intellectual curiosity, it's adaptability to change, individuals who are walking towards new transformations, new technologies, they're able to flex their style in different situations with different people. If you can hire for one thing and develop just one thing, look at that. Underneath it is business acumen. Supply chain desperately needs storytellers. It needs individuals that can simplify really complicated supply chain concepts and make it tangible and accessible to business people who don't work in supply chain. You need to be able to communicate with them and influence them, or else you'll be ineffective. And then beneath that is end-to-end supply chain knowledge and ecosystem orchestration. Do you understand the full value chain? from your customers all the way down to your tier 2 suppliers. What are the trade-offs that exist so you're able to unlock proper integrated value? This is what CSCOs are looking for. And you're probably thinking, where are the technical skills, Leo? Well, of course they're there. Right in the middle here. We looked at 234 CSCOs for this one, and I'm not saying to you that technical skills don't matter, because they do. And we all know that they do. But they're not the differentiator anymore. End-to-end supply chain experience, effective communication, and agile mindset came out as number one once again, even with this very, very broad cohort of chief supply chain officers. They're looking for individuals that work collaboratively across the business and can deliver short-term performance whilst transforming for the future. So now we've got some top tips for you. The first one for you, and then Bart's going to give it some CSCO color, is take ownership of your supply chain exposure. You're all at different points in your career, but the most effective chief supply chain officer candidates and people who are looking for end-to-end leadership roles, they've had, hey presto, exposure across multiple functions. So the question is, what are you doing to get exposure beyond the function that you've grown up in? If you're a plant leader, it's no longer good enough to do that, to take a CSCO role or an enterprise role. Get out of your procurement silo, get out of your logistics silo. You need to be able to understand perfectly what the requirements are for the other links in the chain. Otherwise, you will be overlooked for more senior roles. Taking advantage of this now is key. If you're further on in your career, you need to think about how you can get that exposure in a different way. World-class chief supply chain officers, they spend more time working with other functions than they do running the supply chain. That's a fact. You should also really emphasize getting in front of suppliers, working with them, and also customer interactions. The most compelling promotion candidates are the ones that have stoic, good examples of working with customers and suppliers alongside the value chain. Normal supply chain leaders, they run the supply chain. Good supply chain leaders, they work across the enterprise, but the great ones, they orchestrate an ecosystem. And I think it's super important that you think about how you can start to do it now to position you perfectly for the future. Bart, can you bring it to life for us?
So, Sensodyne. Who uses Sensodyne in the room? Not many. My God, there's a few Haleon people at least. My God, Anyway, Sensodyne invented clinical toothpaste, which is the number one for clinical toothpaste. It closes occlusions in your teeth and avoids you having sensitivity when you use coffee and ice cream. It is a great product, and my story is about Sensodyne. And this story starts with, what does it take to think end-to-end in a supply chain? And how do you think about end-to-end? Does it really matter? And whatever role you have in the supply chain, the first thing that you have to be able to do is everybody in the supply chain understand the end-to-end and the responsibility they have. So, how many people go and visit their consumers at the place where they use their product? How many people visit their consumers every time they go to a plant visit or go to a country visit? How do you interact with your consumer and understand the way they're using the product and what matters? How does that then relate to where the product is taken on shelf? How do you think about your customers? How often do you talk to your customers? What matters to your customers? Why does it matter to your customer? And how can you think about the relationship that your customer has with the consumer? How do you then think about bringing the product to your customer in the most efficient way? But is efficiency all that matters? Do they care about sustainability? Do they care about where the product's made? Do they care about the fact that it's made in Asia? Do they care? Does it matter? Are those things that are in your vocabulary and the way you're talking to your customer and your consumer? Do you think about the product and the ingredients that are used in the product? Where those ingredients come from, why they come from there, and how sustainable they are, and how important they are to the customer and the consumer. And all of those things matter in understanding the supply chain. But actually, that is just the basics. That is what we expect from everybody in the supply chain. And I put to you that this is simply not enough for supply chain leaders today to think about the world that they're operating in. And the world that we're operating in is an ecosystem, not a supply chain. And the ecosystem is very dynamic. And I'm giving you a tool here that I think can help you think differently about how you're managing your supply chain, looking at it from the perspective of an ecosystem. And the ecosystem, there are basically very simple things that you can think about when it comes to thinking about the ecosystem. You think about the political dimensions, you think about the economical dimensions, social, technological, legal, and environmental. I'll come back to all of them. But these are the dimensions that I think are extremely relevant in the way you think about your ecosystem. And for Sensodyne, here's some examples of why that matters. So clearly tariffs everybody's talking about, but titanium dioxide, when you pick up Sensodyne, for those that have used it, it matters that it's white. Titanium dioxide is a material that makes it white. That was politically no longer possible in Europe to have titanium dioxide used in the product. Being ahead of that change, understanding the political dimensions in Europe of what that change meant that Sensodyne was ahead of thinking in moving forward with that product and that change. How are your suppliers changing? How are suppliers merging on the open market? What are the interest rates doing? Why does cash matter as much as it does a year ago, as much as it will in a year, with the interest rates and the inflation and the way the external environment is operating? How do you think about where you make products? How do you think about transformation in the economy? How do we think about AI and technology when robots appear all over the world? What does that do in terms of labor arbitrage? If everything is automated, is the same true that labor arbitrage matters so much in the manufacturing operation as it did in the past? I've spent 35 years globalizing supply chains. I think you're going to spend the next 35 years localizing supply chains. And I think labor arbitrage is becoming less relevant in an automated world. So thinking about how economic change might change the dimensions of where you invest and where you don't invest is absolutely critical to thinking about what you're doing in the supply chain. Socially, I don't know if anybody's here from Africa, but I think 20 years ago, 7% of the world's population was in Africa. In 50 years' time, almost 30% of the world's population will be in Africa. How do we think about that dimensionally for the way you think about long-term investments in the supply chain? They're very relevant in the way you think about the future. How do you think about technology? Is toothpaste going to be in a tube for the next 50 years? I don't think so. I think we'll think differently about how we think about toothpaste, how we care for teeth, how we dimension that, how our competitors work. Should we work with competitors on creating more innovative solutions that help consumers and the planet to make the planet better for the future? So how do we think about technology and how it's transforming? How do we think about the legal framework around us? How do we think about the regulatory framework around us? How do we unlock innovation and influence our regulatory partners and the governments to unlock innovation, unlock consumer-relevant innovation? How do we influence that in the way we think about things? And clearly the environmental dimension, how do we think about transforming? And supply chain is at the heart of that in terms of the dimension of sustainability. And these are fundamentally, I think, the dimensions that you think about the supply chain and that you can transform the way you think about the supply chain and the ecosystem in which you're operating and the way in which you talk to the business about transformational change. This is a set of dimensions that I think can be very impactful in the breadth in which you talk about the dimensional change that you want to make in your operations. So, Leo, back to you.
Thank you.
Practical tip 2.
Okay, so the next frontier is how do you show up in a meeting where there's other stakeholders present, right? How do you influence in those cross-functional settings? The first thing is, how well do you really know the business and how well do you really know the product set that you're selling? If you do not know this incredibly well, I think you should forget about being able to be influential at all. Once you have this foundational understanding, you'll be able to push back effectively and in the right way to contribute to trade-off discussions effectively. Then you've got to translate your supply chain knowledge into information and words that your business partners can understand. If you can't do this, forget about it once again. They will not listen to you. They don't know what OEE is. They have no idea how inventory works usually. And if you're in an S&OP meeting, you've got to talk about trade-offs in ways that matter to them and to the customer, rather than what matters to your operational metrics. Then you're in a place to earn your seat at the table. What we don't want to happen is that you're sat at this table providing updates. That's not what we want. We want individuals that are providing scenarios and shaping decisions. You need to be more influential than just providing an update. We want you to challenge and educate. We can't do this because of X, Y, and Z. We want you to be providing trade-offs and properly challenging individuals. And then we don't want you just contributing to supply chain topics. Importantly, if you can actually start to contribute to other areas, supply chain is such a differentiator. It needs to be positioned as such. And it should be positioned as a competitive advantage. If you do these things in cross-functional meetings, you will be more effective, you will elevate supply chain's position within your organization, and you'll have more influence as a whole on the value chain. Now, Bart, do you want to talk about how this happens in real world? Oh, sorry, last one. Please be concise. The main feedback we get from other non-supply chain folks is they spoke for a really long time, and we didn't know what they were talking about.
Some pressure to be concise now, I think, so I'll try. Two companies I had the pleasure of working with. As I kind of left corporate and went into private equity, I kind of did quite a bit of what is the model for capitalism that can be effective in creating value for shareholders, consumers, customers, across the spectrum of things that the multi-stakeholder society that we all operate in. And I reflected a bit on the two organizations on the chart here. One organization, Reckitt, that I worked for, it was 4 billion revenue when I joined in 2004. It was pretty much 11 billion when I left. The purpose of that organization was very simple: deliver shareholder value. And everybody lined up to delivering shareholder value. Right or wrong, that was the purpose of the organization, and that's what its outcome was. Unilever had a slightly broader purpose, which was to deliver stakeholder value, not just shareholder value. And it was much broader in its ecosystem thinking and what it was trying to achieve. One delivered outstanding performance. In fact, the share price went 10x over the period of 15 years, which is quite remarkable during that period of time. What I would contest to you, and what I learned from this, I guess, what my learning is from this, is very simple. Understand what is driving the business. The purpose statement of your organization matters. It matters because it's saying what this company is about. And if you can align your purpose, what you're about, do you come to work for doing more than just money? I hope so, because I think that's fulfilling in life, and that's what makes life fulfilling. So if you're coming to work for more than just money, how do you make sure your personal purpose aligns with the purpose of the organization that you're part of? And that is critical to being successful in understanding the business in which you're operating. And understanding the business in which you're operating and its motivations is something that I didn't do well enough, I have to say, during my career. And I've got a model for you, which is about how Reckitt used to talk about creating business value. And I think it's a really useful model to put in front of leadership when you talk about transformational programs that you may want to deliver. And the model is very simple. There's lots of numbers on here, but they're very simple. Right, 2020, you had a company that had a revenue of 10 million, a 50% margin, delivering 2 million net income. Okay, that's the starting point. By 2025, this was growing at 4% a year. Not bad, not brilliant, but pretty good. Margin was the same, 50%. You're delivering 3 million. The valuation of the company at 20 PE multiple is 60 billion. Okay, that's the starting point. Then, good news, between now and 2030, we're going to keep growing at 4% a year. We're going to keep the margin at 50%. All things equal, we're going to deliver 4.2 EBITDA. The value of the business will be 84 billion. Pretty cool. 5 years, you've delivered 24 billion valuation. Now, my question is, in this room, you're in supply chain. What is the contribution you can make to that P&L? What are the contributions that you can make? Anybody want to have a go? Yeah. You can impact COGS. Thank you. You can certainly impact gross margin. Any other line you can definitely impact. The top line? Do we think about impacting the top line? Can we make service so good that the top line is better? Can we do innovation faster by making the top line better? So my contention, and here's what I think supply chain leaders can put forward to their business and say, I can deliver you 1% more growth by being brilliant at service, by being brilliant at innovation. And by the way, at the same time, I'll do 50 bips a year on my gross margin, and therefore I'll take it to 52% in 5 years. Reasonable? Are you all doing 50 bips? You know, that's not probably more, some of you at the moment, in terms of gross margin improvement. So I'll take the gross margin to 52, and I'll take the growth to 5%. Anybody want to guess what the valuation will be at that point in time? Want to give me a number? It's 84 right now. What do you want to take it to? And by the way, if you're doing 5% growth and 52 margin, I would argue your multiple on PE will also change. Nobody wants to give me a number. Okay, right. 96 is the first number, and more importantly, the second number is 120. So because you're now doing 5% and you're doing 52%, your price earnings ratio, your valuation in the city will go up. So supply chain actions can double the valuation of a business over 5 years. It's just maths. It's just maths. And how do we put that across to our boards, our exec teams? How do we translate what we're doing, that it isn't a cost opportunity, that it isn't the grinding of cost, but it's the value creation opportunity, which is what this story is about. How do I work out what matters to my business? How do I create value? How do I think about creating value? And how do I tell that story in a way that isn't just cost? That's what this is about. And that's practical tip number 2. Talk about the business. Enabling transformation. Number 3, being a transformational leader. What does it take to be a transformational leader? Well, I think I spent 98% of my time not being a transformational leader, actually. And I was on the beach. Here's a picture of a beach. Why has this guy put a picture of a beach on the thing? So I spent a lot of time cleaning the beach in the morning, getting up, putting the deck chairs out on the beach, buying new deck chairs so that they look really good, getting a bit more of the beach in the morning versus the competitor next door, because that way I got more customers. I put the deck chairs a little bit closer together every day, and I made sure that the beach was really clean and it was more attractive than the guy next door. And I got up at 6 every morning and I went to bed at 9 every night doing that. And that was really important, because that is the fundamentals of what drives supply chain. We are operations people. We run operations. We do operations better than the guy next door. We get up early and we make the beach look brilliant. And we make the deck chairs look brilliant. And we make everything on the beach fantastic. And that is what we do for a living. And I spent 98% of my time doing that. But what did I not do? Well, there's a great big wave coming to the beach, which is going to mean that dimensions of the beach are going to be completely different. And I didn't spend enough time looking at the wave and working out what the wave is going to do to transform the way the beach is operating. And so my contention is supply chain leaders spend too much time on the beach and not enough time at the wave, thinking about how transformation, how curious you are, how you're going to think about transformation and making transformation, and what it's going to take in your own leadership to transform something. Because it takes bravery, it takes guts, it takes change management to think about the wave. It's a little bit easier sometimes just to think about the beach. And so there's a few companies. Anybody from Ocado here? Or been at Ocado? No. Good. Well, otherwise they can come and do the presentation. But there's a few companies that I think have transformed the way things are happening. And I just want to give a few examples, because I think it's nice to talk about something, but it's nice to talk about something that's actually come to life. So a few examples: chemistry company that is created by one owner, now worth a significant amount of money. They've automated completely the lab of a pharmaceutical organization. Quite remarkable, using AI, using technology, full automation of the lab. A company called Invisalign, I don't know if orthodontic treatment has been completely reinvented. It is now 3D printed, 1 billion individually personalized 3D printed orthodontic treatments made in a massive 3D printed factory, capable of delivering personalized orthodontic treatment for individuals. And lastly, there's a few others, but let me talk about Ocado. Ocado have been in the news recently. They're actually making some redundancies. Their financials aren't great. They were hugely challenged financially, but they have reinvented fulfillment, actually. And here's the place in the UK, and I would say this is probably the most modern fulfillment center in the world. What I love about it is every time a customer orders a product, and by the way, let me talk about this. There's 3 football pitches. These robots travel around. Underneath these robots, there's 20 bins of product. Each bin contains a banana and an apple, an iPhone. And the product's moved around so that one bin of banana is put next to an empty bag. The robot picks the banana out of the container, puts it in the empty bag, which is the customer's shopping basket, moves it all around again, finds an Apple iPhone, does the same thing, translates that into a delivery to a customer. And the wonderful thing about this, not only is the physical technology quite transformational, but every time a customer orders a product, every single time a customer orders a product, they do a capacity analysis, they do a demand plan review, and they do a supply plan review. And the frozen, chilled, and ambient, there's 3 frozen, chilled, and ambient of these things. Every time a customer orders, it reconfigures the transportation solution. It checks that the banana's available. It checks that it's got capacity to put the banana into the bag. And it makes sure that the frozen, chilled, and ambient arrive in the truck, which is going to deliver to 6 different customers on that leg. And that is repeated on a second-by-second process. We're doing S&OP every month, perhaps, if we're lucky. We're doing a demand cycle on a weekly basis, if we're lucky. So the point is, the technology is there. It's happening today. And there are 2 things that I would encourage you when you think about transformation. 1, the future is here today. Think about what the future might be in 10 years' time and build a plan to get there and inspire people around what the future looks like and be bold and ambitious in transformation because others are being bold and ambitious. And so that's what this is an example of. So fundamentally, practical tip 3 is being transformational. Be curious about what's out there in the world. Look particularly at small businesses. In my view, small businesses, I've spent a lot of time with them in the last couple of years, can be more innovative perhaps than large enterprises. Look for weak signals of what the future looks like in 15 years' time. The future is here today. It's just not everywhere. That's a fundamental message. Find a way to experiment and be bold. Go to your boss and say, I want to experiment. I need a certain amount of money and I want to experiment. And be ambitious and what have you got to lose if you build a business case that allows you to be experimental? I think it's a great thing. And then pick the winners and be able to scale them. Clearly, large organizations need to be able to scale winners. So that's really important. And then once you pick your winners, stick with it. And Leo's going to talk to you a little bit about what it takes to stick with it and what it takes to create change and transformation in your organization. So Leo.
Thank you, Bart. Okay, so let's say you've got a new revolutionary idea. It could just be a new continuous improvement methodology, who knows? And you want to drive some cultural change within your organization because a new process is just going to stay dormant unless people actually start to use it, right? So the first step is, can you create and tell a really compelling story about the change? Can you paint that picture and that North Star? If you cannot create a story and a clear vision for others to engage in, no one's going to believe it. The change will fail. Forget about it. Once you've got that done, you then need to identify a group of individuals who are the ones with outside influence. They are existing at every level within your organization. I'm not talking about your team. It's every individual, every level has an influencer in it. From the shop floor all the way up to your plant leadership team, whatever part of the organization you're in, identify who are those people that if we get them on board, they're going to have an outsized impact. And then you start to create a cadence of quick wins to showcase this is happening, this is working. It doesn't have to be massive, it's small. And what we want you to do is reach something called the tipping point. So behavioral science has shown to us that once you get 10 to 20% of a population behaving in a new way, the rest of them, it will go viral. The rest of them will all start to take shape. So if there's 100 individuals, if we just take the plant example, if there's 100 individuals in your plant, you just need to get between 10 and 20 of them on board. The rest will follow suit. So making sure that you're able to identify who are those 10 to 20, then it will go viral within your organization and you will have a movement, proper new behavior, a mass behavioral change at scale. People who are non-believers become believers. Everyone's clapping, everyone's happy, warm and fuzzy. So let's see how this works in real life. So you're probably wondering, why am I showing you this man who's taken a lot of mushrooms and drunk a lot at a festival. Change is controversial. It can feel pretty weird at times. You have to be very brave. This is a single brave act. The interesting thing about this is that I want you not to focus on the loony with his top off. I want you to focus on the second person. This is the first follower. They are the real catalyst. They show everybody else around that it's okay to be part of this change. They break down the barriers. They show him that it's safe. And look how much fun they're having. Look at this guy. He's doing little handstands and stuff. It's great. Still, everyone else is ignoring them though, right? Everyone else is ignoring them. They're dancing, and they're making it pretty easy to follow, if you ask me. Pretty easy to follow. And before long, we've got ourselves a third person who's joining in on this dance party. 3 people, all looking like idiots, having a wonderful time. But guess what? We're about to see the tipping point in action. Because as this guy does a reverse roly-poly, we can start to see that the movement is building. There's now 5 people. 5 people, quite quickly, turns to 10. This is an example of the behavior, the tipping point being reached. This is what you need to achieve. You need to dance like an idiot long enough for everyone to start running towards you to be part of your movement. And it isn't a solo act. This is individuals. And one of the big problems we see in supply chain is you've done a Kaizen, you leave, the improvement dips again. Do you think if this guy leaves, the dance party is going to stop? It's not. They've created a change. And this is what I want you to think about when you're thinking about driving change in your organizations. So the last thing we're going to talk about, our final tip, is the importance of an agile mindset. This, and I know I'm focusing a lot on plant leaders today, but imagine what your day looks like. So Gemba walk, supply chain town hall, top-to-top meeting with the executive team, disruption response update, God forbid, but we all know it happens. Each one of these things requires a different approach to be successful. One of the issues we see with individuals in supply chain is they treat every single interaction the same way. The most effective ones are adapting their communication and their approach dependent on the situation, the audience, and what they are trying to achieve. At a Gemba walk, you want to be coaching and asking intelligent questions, empowering them to act. At a supply chain town hall, maybe you're speaking, right? How can you be visionary? How can you engage individuals' hearts and minds into the purpose of what you are trying to drive? At a top-to-top supply meeting, you're trying to understand the supplier and engage them in your mission. It's a different strategy. You can't just batter them into compliance there. At a meeting with the executive board, you need to drop the supply chain language and speak in enterprise terms. And then at a disruption response update, you need to be really direct. You need to get to the bottom of this, and you need to solve it. So being adaptive and understanding what should I be doing now in this moment to be effective is absolutely key. And the reason it's so key, I would argue, other than the CEO, the supply chain leader has the most axes on which they have to flex on. They're at the Gemba 1 moment, then they're in the BULT. They're expected to be very feasible and drive innovation. You've got to be incredibly accountable, but then empowering. It's a nightmare. The people who are most effective are those that are identifying that this is a challenge. How can we be agile enough to deal with it? So communication agility, effective at the Gemba, credible at the Gemba, but then business terms with the LT, enterprise value. Can they shift from real deep supply chain technical knowledge and then lift it up so it makes sense for others? And then can they deliver short-term performance and long-term transformation? Understanding this challenge and adapting the way that you think about it is critical to be successful. And now we're going to show you a pump-up video from Nike.
There are no grand celebrations here, no speeches, no bright lights. But there are great athletes. Somehow we've come to believe that greatness is reserved for the chosen few, for the superstars. The truth is, greatness is for all of us. This is not about lowering expectations. It's about raising them for every last one of us. Because greatness is not in one special place. And it is not in one special person. Greatness is wherever somebody is trying to find it.
I love that kid at the end so much. Okay, so finishing up now, let's go for some takeaways. So number one, as we've talked about, take it upon yourself to understand and orchestrate the ecosystem.
Yeah, when you're on the top of the diving board, what's it going to take to truly influence at enterprise level? How are you going to get the enterprise behind what you're trying to achieve?
Embrace the future, be curious, and start to transform. Don't be doing the deck chairs like Bart did the whole time. Think about the wave.
And be brave and drive change. It takes, you're going to get some stuff wrong, and you're going to have failure. And the point is, the big difference is the ones who get up and try again, right? That's what we know. And here it's all about being brave and driving change and taking that step, getting to the top of the platform and jumping off.
And then the last one is develop agility. We saw how challenging it can be. And finally, I'll leave you with the quote from Albert Einstein. I'm neither clever nor especially gifted. I'm only very, very curious. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are we leave? Questions?
Oh, okay.
Any questions, guys? Any comments? Any learnings you have? We've got kind of 5 minutes, I think, before we wrap up this session. So we'd love to hear any comments or questions. Yeah. So the question, maybe you didn't hear it, but the question is, why is there so much? This is great, we love it. Why is there so much resistance from the top? And I would put 2 comments to you. One, I think the top can be focused on many things that you're not necessarily focused on, and therefore they're not interested in what you're saying. They can be incorrect and get it wrong. The top don't have an equity in being right. And maybe positioning it in a way where it is consistent with what they're looking for and empathizing with them and understanding what it's going to take to meet them where they are rather than meet them where you are is, I think, a way of kind of trying to find a way through that, perhaps. So there's no perfect answer, but I think empathy of who you're trying to connect to, understanding really, truly what matters to them, and then making it relevant for them rather than relevant for you, is the first point about, I think, making a successful transformation. Any others? Yeah. Yeah, lady at the front here.
There's a lot to talk about agility.
We've got a mic now, actually, which will help, yeah.
There's a lot of talk about agility, right? And we talked about it a lot today as well. How can we quantify agility? How can we measure it to make sure we're there and we're getting there?
Ooh, that's a good question. You got any answers to
I
that
can
one?
answer that. Yeah.
Go on.
So there's different elements of learning agility. One of them is change agility. The other is people agility, results agility, and situational self-awareness. So those are the different ways that Korn, Ferry, and others look at agility. So to boil it down, look at how good are you at adapting your style with different people in different situations? How good are you at when the task you're expected to do changes, dealing with that? And how good are you at responding well to change as a whole, right? So there's a change curve that everyone has to go through, realizing how comfortable you are with that when things are gray. And then the last one being situational self-awareness is, in the moment, I'm in a meeting, the meeting is not going well. Am I plowing on, or am I realizing in the moment that things aren't perhaps going quite to plan? Being able to stop and adjust at that point is also part of agility. So I have a lot of information I can send to you that will help you look at that. And maybe if we can speak to Leon afterwards, I can give you a proper definition that shows you how you can apply it to yourself. Of course.
That was a good answer. Well done, Leo. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Quick question, and do you have any practical advice on you spoke about going from moments to momentum, identifying those first 10 to 20% of initial followers. So any practical advice on how to find them and how to get them on board?
Yes, so they're the ones that are speaking up in meetings. They're probably the ones that are taking people to the pub. They might have been there the longest. Don't look for seniority. Look for people who are in the middle of the lunch table, having a coffee with people. They're sociable. They have an oversized social influence beyond their role. And if you put your mind to it, they probably start to pop into your heads where they're more junior than you expect. They might have been there for a long time. They might have been there from a new company, but they're starting to, when they speak, people listen. That's the kind of rule that you're looking for. The mistake I really see people make is they look at titles when they're trying to drive change, and it doesn't work, right? So think about the social equity rather than their seniority.
They might also be a bit anti-establishment and a bit anti-management and a bit kind of, I remember in Spain, the union were sometimes very difficult. But if you could get them behind a change, it would make a big difference. And so they might be anti-management. They might completely disagree with you what you've got to say, but it's worth the conversation to get them around the transformation, I guess. But you were going to say something else, I think.
No, just wanted to say thanks.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more for any more? Oh, we've got one. Okay.
Hi. Just a quick question for Bart, for me. Lots of experience, previous chief supply chain officer in large businesses. So what was your key lesson learned, your takeaway around, you'll have been in this position, I'm sure. The board is saying to you, you've got to deliver your net structural savings, you've got to get your cost to serve down, but at the same time, you're trying to engage, empower frontline members of staff to go on the transformation journey with you. And how did you get the board to hold back a little bit and still give you time to make the change if you were a little bit behind? And that happens, right? And sometimes boards, they get fed up and they don't see the quick wins quickly enough and projects come and go. So how did you manage that? Just really interested from your experience.
Two comments. One, I'm on a few boards now, and I think boards get it. And they're usually people who have been around a bit. And so my question is, are you connecting with the right board members to understand why? Are they understanding? Usually they do, because they've usually done some of these roles. So I think it's about the board. Yes, they're always going to put pressure on. That's their job. They want outcomes which are better than the others. But I think if you engage them in a conversation, and I did this with a few board members at Haleon, and I try and help people now, engage them in a conversation about, here's my challenge. I am trying to bring the organization with me. You're pushing me faster than I think I can go. How can I solve that problem? How can you help me solve that problem? And not necessarily in an environment where there's 15 board members where you're presenting something, but an environment where you can get one-to-one with one or two influential board members. Influential board members, how do you pick the ones that are influential? Who can then make a difference when you have a meeting that's a kind of set piece kind of environment. And so that would be the way I would think about it, because I think they're all, genuinely, the board want you to succeed. I mean, that's all they want, actually. And they want everybody in the organization to succeed. So I think if you start from that place, I think they're always going to kind of be there to support you, even if you're in a very difficult situation. And being open and honest about that, I think, will get you a long way. Will get you a long way. Super. We are at time. I just want to say thank you much for your attention and thanks for the opportunity. So
Thank you.
Yeah.